Chapter 1. The Man She Brought Home. The Carter home was tucked away in a quiet suburb of San Diego, shaded by old oak trees and surrounded by the scent of fresh-cut lumber from the small woodshop behind the house. Richard Carter, a reserved man with calloused hands and storm-gray eyes, stood in his kitchen rinsing his coffee mug. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains as the familiar hum of Emily's old car echoed into the driveway. She was home. He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. Emily pushed open the door with a radiant energy that only a young woman in love could possess. Her cheeks were flushed, and her voice was brighter than usual. "Dad, I brought someone I want you to meet." Behind her stepped in a sharply dressed man in a tailored blazer. He extended a confident hand, but his eyes scanned the room as if appraising its value. "Daniel Thompson," he said. "Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Carter." Richard gave a small nod and took Daniel's hand without warmth. His handshake was firm, his gaze direct. "Richard." Emily didn't notice the shift in temperature. She was too busy chattering about how they met at a networking event and how Daniel was doing well in real estate. Daniel just closed a deal on a whole complex in downtown. "He's brilliant, Dad." And she paused for dramatic effect. "We're thinking of getting married." The silence that followed was loud. Richard set down his cup, slowly drying his hands. "You just met him 6 months ago." Emily bristled. 6 months is long enough to know someone. Richard turned to Daniel. "What are your intentions with my daughter?" Daniel laughed, too easily. "To build a life with her, of course. She's special. I think we both know that." Richard said nothing more. His eyes lingered on the way Daniel glanced at his phone mid-conversation, on the dismissive tone he used when Emily mentioned wanting to open her own wedding event company. Later that evening, after Daniel left, Emily cornered her father in the garage while he was sanding down a piece of mahogany. "Why are you being so cold to him?" she asked. "He's not right for you," Richard said simply. "You barely spoke to him." "I've met men like him before." "You don't know him," she snapped. "You're just being your usual cold, stubborn self. You think no one's good enough for me." "I think you deserve better," he said, eyes never leaving the wood. Emily's voice cracked. "You're never happy for me. Ever since Mom died, all you care about is your damn woodshop." Richard froze, but said nothing. That night, Emily packed a bag and left. A note sat on the kitchen table the next morning. "I'm moving in with Daniel. We're getting married next month. I hope one day you'll come around." He didn't go to the wedding. The ceremony was held on a bluff overlooking the ocean. The chairs were white, the flowers expensive. Emily smiled for photos, but every time she glanced into the crowd, a hole opened in her chest. The one person she had always longed for in every milestone, her father, was not there. Daniel didn't seem to notice. He was too busy making calls, checking emails even during the reception. That night, as the ocean roared beyond the suite window, Emily curled under the sheets alone. Daniel was already asleep, snoring, back turned. It was the first night of many. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Smile. 2 months into the marriage, Emily Carter began to learn the kind of love Daniel Thompson offered. At first, it was little things. He would ignore her suggestions during dinner conversations. If she expressed an opinion on something, music, movies, or the decor of their condo, he'd smirk and say, "That's cute, but let's go with something more modern." Her dream of starting her own event company? He called it a hobby and laughed when she brought it up during their weekly budgeting talks. "Let's be honest, he said one night, sipping scotch on their pristine balcony. "You wouldn't last a month in business. You're too sensitive. Just enjoy life, all right? I'm taking care of us." Emily forced a smile, the kind that tightens your chest. She stopped bringing it up after that. Then came the isolation. Daniel disliked her calling her old friends. "Why do you need them when you have me?" he'd ask. resting his hand heavily on hers, his voice dripping with sweetness and control. If she ever mentioned wanting to visit her father, he'd say something like, "You know how he feels about me. Let's not stir the pot." Soon, Emily found herself always alone in the condo. Daniel worked late, often until past midnight. When he came home, he smelled of cologne that wasn't his. His shirt sometimes slightly wrinkled in ways that didn't match a desk job. One night, she gathered the courage. "Daniel," she said, softly, "are you seeing someone?" He didn't answer. Just looked at her. Then he chuckled. "You're so insecure sometimes. No wonder your dad didn't trust me. You're just like him. Always suspicious. Always emotional." He left the room. And she sat there on the kitchen floor, still in her apron, dinner untouched on the table. That night, she cried until her chest hurt. And still, she didn't call her father. It was a Wednesday evening when it happened. Emily had been trying to cook Daniel's favorite meal, steak and garlic mashed potatoes, but she accidentally burned the edges. When Daniel came home, he stared at the food, then at her. "You had one job," he muttered, walking past her. "One ****ing job." She didn't respond. She just stared at the plate. Then at the smoke-stained oven mitt in her hand. That night, as he slammed the door to the bedroom, Emily took her phone and walked out to the balcony. Her fingers hesitated on the screen. She hadn't called him in months. She had sent a few texts that went unanswered. But now, something inside her broke. She hit the call button. 1 ring. 2. 3. He picked up. "Hello?" His voice was low, steady. Emily couldn't speak. Her lips trembled. The words lodged in her throat. She started crying, slow at first, then uncontrollably. On the other end, Richard didn't say anything. No questions. No scolding. No "I told you so." Just silence. The kind of silence that wrapped around her like a blanket. That let her know he was listening. That told her she wasn't alone. After a long moment, she whispered, "I'm sorry, Dad." Still no reply. Just the sound of breathing. Just presence. I can't do this anymore," she sobbed. "I thought I knew him. I didn't. I made a mistake. A big one." The line was still open. "I want to come home." Then the call ended. No words. Just a click. She thought maybe the line had dropped. She stared at the phone in her hand, heart pounding with shame and regret. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. She opened it and froze. There he was. Richard Carter. Standing tall, quiet as ever. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He just looked at her with those storm gray eyes that now held something deeper, something like forgiveness and pain. And love, all tangled together. In his hands, a worn-out duffel bag. "Pack your things," he said simply. Emily's knees gave out. She fell into his arms and cried like a child. Chapter 3. The Silent Rescue. Emily didn't know how long she had cried into her father's chest. It had been years since she last felt safe, and even longer since she had let herself break in front of anyone. But in that moment, outside the doorway of the home she thought would be her forever, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: relief. Richard didn't say much. He gently peeled her away, looked into her puffy, tear-soaked eyes, and nodded toward the inside of the condo. "Let's get your things," he said. Emily hesitated. "He's still sleeping." Richard's jaw tightened slightly. "Then we move quietly." They walked in. The condo was still, lit only by the pale morning sun filtering through the sheer curtains. She led him into the bedroom, where Daniel lay sprawled on the bed, the sheets barely covering him, his mouth half open in deep sleep. There was an empty wine glass on the nightstand. Lipstick on the rim. Not hers. She felt a flash of shame. Then anger, but she kept her focus. One by one, she pulled out her clothes, her books, the photo frames she had once proudly placed on the shelves. Her father stood by the door, watching silently, letting her choose what to bring and what to leave behind. When she passed by the living room, she paused at the wedding portrait. "Leave it," Richard said gently. She looked at him. "Some memories aren't worth carrying," he added. Emily nodded. They packed in silence until she had only one bag in her hand and a tote slung over her shoulder. As they reached the door, Daniel stirred. He opened one eye and sat up slightly confused. "Em? Where the hell are you going?" She didn't answer. He looked past her and saw Richard. "Oh, I see how it is," Daniel muttered, rubbing his face. "Running back to Daddy the moment things get tough? Figures." Richard didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He just held the door open. Daniel laughed bitterly. "Go ahead. You're just like her." "Weak." Emily turned her head. "I was never weak," she said, her voice steady. "I just gave the wrong man too many chances." She walked out. Richard followed, closing the door behind them with a soft, final click. The car ride home was long and quiet, but not heavy. Emily sat with her knees drawn up slightly, looking out the window as the streets of downtown San Diego gave way to the calm, tree-lined avenues of the suburbs. Her father's pickup truck smelled faintly of wood shavings and lemon oil. The same smell from her childhood. The smell of home. She finally spoke when they turned onto Maple Ridge Lane. "You didn't ask any questions." "I didn't need to," Richard replied. "Aren't you angry at me?" she asked softly. He was quiet for a moment. "No." She turned to look at him. "Why not?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Because you're my daughter. And because I've made mistakes too." Emily felt tears burn the corners of her eyes again. "I should have listened to you," she whispered. Richard didn't respond. But when he pulled into the driveway and parked, he placed a hand on her shoulder before getting out. It was the first time he had touched her since the wedding, and it said more than any words could. Inside the house, nothing had changed. The same old brown couch with its tiny scratches from their cat, who had passed away years ago. The same framed photos on the wall, her high school graduation, her mother's smile frozen in time, and a younger version of Emily hugging a wooden horse her father had carved. Richard led her to the guest room. The bed had clean sheets, a folded blanket at the foot. A small stack of books still sat on the nightstand, ones she had left behind long ago. "I never changed it," he said simply. Emily sat down, the bed creaking softly beneath her weight. The tears came again, but they were quieter this time. "I don't know how to start over," she admitted. "You don't have to today," Richard replied. "You just rest." And then, for the first time in what felt like years, he did something he hadn't done since she was a little girl. He gently tucked the blanket around her shoulders. Chapter 4. Learning to breathe again. Morning light spilled through the gauzy curtains, soft and golden. Emily blinked awake to the sound of birds chirping outside her window and the distant hum of her father's workshop. It had been years since she had awoken to that sound, steady, rhythmic, familiar. The hum of sanders, the gentle thuds of wood meeting wood. It was like her childhood had quietly crept back to the edges of her senses. She sat up slowly, her body sore from stress and her mind heavy from the past months. But in this room, wrapped in the scent of lavender detergent and sawdust, there was a strange kind of peace. Her phone was silent. No angry messages. No missed calls from Daniel. Only silence. Only safety. Downstairs, she found a plate on the kitchen table, scrambled eggs, toast with strawberry jam, and a mug of hot tea. A folded napkin rested beside it, with a note in her father's blunt handwriting. "Eat. I'll be out back. Take your time." "Dad." Emily smiled, just a little. After breakfast, she stepped into the backyard. The air was cool, filled with the scent of fresh pine and varnish. Richard stood at his workbench, planing a large slab of wood, his movements slow and deliberate. He wore the same brown apron she remembered from when she was a child, when she used to sit cross-legged on the floor and watch him create things from nothing. He glanced up but said nothing. Just nodded, acknowledging her presence. She stood for a moment, unsure if she was supposed to speak. Finally, she broke the silence. "Is that a new table?" He grunted in confirmation. "For a client?" "No," he said, smoothing another edge. "Thought the dining room needed something fresh." Emily stepped closer, her fingers grazing the surface. The wood was beautiful, solid maple, with veins like rivers and a warm, honey finish. She remembered how he used to let her help varnish the corners, how he always handed her the brush with care. "You still remember how to do this?" he asked without looking up. She smiled. "Sort of." He handed her a piece of sandpaper. "Then sand the legs. Light strokes. Let the grain guide you." She took it, knelt beside the table, and began to work. For the next hour, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their movements found a rhythm, his steady and practiced, hers careful and timid. But there was something deeply healing in the act. In the silence. In the shared space between them. Later, as they sat on the porch sipping lemonade, Emily spoke again. "Dad, I want to say I'm sorry." He didn't interrupt. He just listened. "I thought I knew everything. I thought love was supposed to be fast and dramatic and beautiful. I didn't listen. I didn't want to hear your warnings." Richard stared out at the garden, the late spring flowers swaying gently in the breeze. "I didn't handle it well either," he said finally. "I should have told you what I saw, what I felt. But I've never been good at saying things." "You've always shown them," Emily whispered. He looked at her. "That man, he made you doubt yourself. And I couldn't stand seeing it. But I didn't know how to pull you back without pushing you away." Her voice broke. "You didn't push me away. I walked." He didn't answer. Just reached out and placed a calloused hand over hers. "You're here now." Emily closed her eyes, letting the wind wrap around them. For the first time in months, she felt her lungs truly fill with air. Not the shallow, anxious breathing she had grown used to, but deep, grounding breath. She was breathing again. That night, after dinner, she helped her father wash the dishes. They didn't talk much, just the clinking of plates and the warmth of routine. But when the last bowl was placed in the rack and the kitchen lights dimmed, Emily turned to him. "Thank you for coming to get me." Richard hesitated only a moment before replying. "I never stopped waiting for your call." Emily wrapped her arms around him. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She was home. Chapter 5. Pieces of a Past Life. A week passed. Then 2. The rhythm of Emily's life began to change, slow, gentle. Nothing like the high-strung pace she had grown used to. Mornings started with the smell of coffee and toast from the kitchen. Afternoons were spent helping her father in the workshop or curled up on the porch with a notebook and tea. At night, the silence of the house no longer felt empty, it felt peaceful. But wounds don't heal just because time passes. One afternoon, while sorting through her things in the guest room, Emily unzipped the last duffel bag she hadn't dared to open. Inside were the remnants of the life she'd fled, her wedding album, a jewelry box with her engagement ring still inside, and a red leather-bound planner where she had once written out hopes for the future. Buy a house. Start a family. Launch my event company. She stared at those scribbled dreams. Her hand trembled. "I wasted so much time," she whispered. She didn't realize her father had been watching from the doorway until he stepped in and said, "No time spent learning is wasted." She looked up, startled. "You don't have to throw it all away," he said gently, nodding toward the items. "You can choose what to keep. And what not to." Emily sat down on the edge of the bed. "I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still you," he said. "Just bruised." And a little more careful, she added with a half smile. He didn't smile back. but he placed a small wooden box on her lap. It was smooth, with her name carved across the lid in delicate cursive. "I started making this the day you got married," he said. "I wasn't there, but I still wanted to give you something." Inside was a collection of tiny keepsakes, an old photo of her as a child on his shoulders, a carved wooden rose like the one he'd given her mother. A folded note in his rough handwriting that simply read, "No matter where you go, this will always be your home." Her eyes filled with tears. She reached out and touched his arm. "You didn't have to keep loving me like this." "I'm your father," he replied. "I never stopped." The next morning, Emily made a quiet decision. She walked into the workshop and placed her event planning folder on the table. The logo she had designed years ago was still there, Carter Moments, Events with Heart. "I want to try again," she said. Richard looked at her, then at the folder. "Then let's get to work." And with that, the healing turned into rebuilding. Chapter 6. Rebuilding Dreams. One table at a time. The first time Emily opened her laptop again, her hands hovered above the keyboard longer than she expected. The screen blinked, waiting for her to return to a world she had once dreamed of conquering. But everything felt different now, slower, deeper, more cautious. She created a new folder on her desktop. Carter Moments, Restart. No pressure. No deadlines. Just a fresh beginning. Over the next few days, Emily and Richard turned the dusty garage into something halfway between a workshop and an office. They cleared space on the old workbench, added shelves for binders and floral samples, and brought in a small desk her father had once built for her when she was 13. "You kept this?" she asked, running her hand over the now slightly chipped corner. "Wasn't much use to me," he said, "but I had a feeling it'd be useful again." She smiled, genuinely this time. "It still fits." Emily spent her mornings researching small-scale event planning projects, birthday parties, bridal showers, backyard weddings. Nothing extravagant. Just work that brought people together with care. She sent out messages to a few local vendors she had met before the wedding. Some remembered her. Others were surprised she was back. One or two asked cautiously about Daniel. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. Instead, she focused on moving forward. Richard, though quiet as ever, showed his support in his own way. He offered to build custom wood signage and centerpieces for her events. When she mentioned she needed display photos, he pulled out an old DSLR camera and offered to help take new shots. "I didn't know you knew photography," she said, half joking. "I don't," he said dryly. "But how hard can it be?" They laughed. A little awkwardly, but it was laughter nonetheless. One afternoon, while organizing sample boards in the kitchen, Emily overheard her father on the phone in the next room. "Yeah, she's home," he said in that low, gravelly voice of his. "She's been through a lot." A pause. "No, I'm not angry. Not at her. Life has a way of teaching what words can't." Another pause. Then softly, "I just want her to be okay." Emily pressed her hand to her chest, feeling the lump in her throat rise again. Not the ache of regret, but the swelling of gratitude. Her father didn't speak much, but his heart had always been louder than any words. That evening, they sat on the porch again. The sky was painted in strokes of orange and lavender, the air warm but kind. "You remember the first wedding you ever helped me with?" Emily asked. He nodded. "You made paper flowers out of tissue boxes." She laughed. "And the wind blew them all into the punch bowl." He gave a rare smile. "Your mother laughed so hard she cried." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. "Thanks for helping me do this again," she whispered. "You're not doing it again," he said. "You're doing it better." That night, Emily opened her calendar and circled a date, 3 weeks from now. Her first event since the divorce. A small backyard wedding for a couple who wanted everything to feel like home. She knew how to create that feeling now, because she had found her way back to it. Chapter 7. The first event back. 3 weeks passed faster than Emily expected. The day of the wedding dawned bright and soft, with a breeze that carried the scent of blooming jasmine from the neighbor's garden. Emily stood in front of her childhood mirror, adjusting the simple linen blouse she had chosen. No heels, no dramatic makeup. Just her. Grounded. Ready. The backyard she'd helped transform over the past 2 days belonged to a couple named Jill and Marcus, both teachers, quiet and kind, who wanted something intimate and personal. Emily had designed every detail with her heart, hand-lettered welcome signs, a trail of lanterns hanging from trees, white chairs on fresh-cut grass. Everything was simple. Everything felt like healing. As guests began to arrive, Emily moved with calm confidence, placing bouquets, checking the sound system, reminding the violinist of the cue for the bride's entrance. Her father stood off to the side, watching quietly. He wore his best flannel shirt and slacks that didn't quite match. In his hands, a wooden photo frame he had carved himself. It was for the couple, a surprise gift. Emily hadn't asked for it. He just made it. You should give it to them, she said, nudging him. He shook his head. You give it. They should know who made it. They'll know. She rolled her eyes, but smiled. You're impossible. And you're your mother's daughter, he replied softly, almost like a memory escaping his lips. The ceremony was tender and warm. Jill cried through her vows. Marcus forgot his lines and improvised, making everyone laugh and tear up at the same time. Emily stood in the back. Hands clasped together, heart full. It was the first time since her own wedding that she'd attended another. But this time, there was no ache, no comparison, no ghosts. Just gratitude. She had built this with her hands. And her father had helped build it with his. After the event, when guests had left and the fairy lights were dimmed, Jill approached Emily with tears in her eyes. I've never felt something so right, she said. You didn't just plan a wedding, you gave us a memory. A home. Emily's eyes welled. That means everything. And this, Jill added, holding up the wooden frame. It's beautiful. Who made it? Emily turned toward the workshop shadows, where her father was silently gathering extra chairs. My dad, she said, her voice thick. He makes things that last. Jill smiled knowingly. So do you. That night, Emily returned home and found her father in the kitchen, washing the last of the dishes from the event. I couldn't have done it without you, she said. You would have found a way. I thought I'd be scared, seeing people in love again. He turned off the water, dried his hands, and looked at her. Love didn't fail you. He did. Emily swallowed hard. I know. Richard reached into the cabinet and pulled out 2 mugs. Poured hot tea. Sat down across from her. You're not broken, Em. I feel like I was. You're not. You bent, but you didn't break. She looked at him, really looked at him. The deep lines on his face. The quiet strength in his presence. The love that had never once been loud, but had never left. I used to think you didn't care, she said. Because you never said much. I was scared, he admitted, surprising her. Of losing you the way I lost your mom. So I held everything in. But maybe I shouldn't have. You were always here, she whispered. And now, he said gently, so are you. Chapter 8. A house with open windows. Days turned into weeks. Emily found herself waking up each morning with a little more lightness in her chest. Her business, Carter Moments, was still small, but it was growing. Word of mouth in their San Diego suburb traveled fast, and her first event had left a warm impression. She started getting emails from people she didn't know. You helped Jill and Marcus with their wedding. We loved it. Can you help organize my mother's 60th birthday? Are you free for a backyard elopement next month? Her calendar began to fill. Not overwhelmingly, but enough to bring purpose back into her days. Richard continued to be her silent partner, never asking, never boasting, but always present. He built wooden signs, card holders, even a foldable archway she could take to outdoor ceremonies. Each time he handed her a new piece, he said the same thing. Just make sure it gets used well. It was the most businesslike thing he ever said. Sometimes she would catch him watching her from the corner of the yard as she rehearsed timelines or laid out color palettes. He never interrupted. He just made sure the lights in the garage stayed on and the lawn was mowed before every event. One afternoon, as Emily was returning home from a planning meeting, she noticed something different about the house. The windows were all open. Sunlight poured through every room. The living room curtains swayed in the breeze. The old piano, untouched for years, had its lid open. "Dad," she called. In here came his voice from the kitchen. She found him sitting at the table, polishing a wooden serving tray. There was a pie cooling on the counter, peach, her favorite. A second mug of tea was already poured. "What's going on?" she asked, amused. Richard looked up. Thought the house could use some air. "It's been years since we opened those windows." He shrugged. Thought maybe it was time. Emily sat down. "It feels alive again." "It's you," he said. "You brought it back." After a long pause, Emily reached into her tote and pulled out an envelope. "What's that?" Richard asked. "A letter from Daniel." His hand paused mid-polish. His eyes stayed on the tray. "I haven't opened it yet," she added. "Do you want to?" "I don't know." He didn't pressure her. He never did. She opened it anyway. The letter was short, apologetic in the way someone writes when they regret being caught. Not being cruel. He wanted to talk sometime. Maybe catch up. Maybe see how things were going. Emily folded it quietly and put it back in the envelope. "I think I'm done with that chapter," she said. Richard nodded. "Then don't reopen it." That night, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in copper, Emily brought out a photo album she hadn't touched since her wedding. But instead of flipping to those pages, she started adding new ones. Jill and Marcus's backyard wedding. The birthday party she helped decorate with sunflowers and hand-painted mason jars. A baby shower next week. Her new beginning. She passed the album to Richard. He stared at it for a long moment. "Your mom would have loved this," he said. "I think she's watching," Emily replied. They sat in the quiet warmth of the living room, windows open, hearts mended, not with grand gestures or dramatic apologies, but with simple presence, honest work, and a kind of love that never needed to be said to be known. Chapter 9. A Daughter's Name in the World. A month later, Emily stood in front of her first client meeting outside the home, at a cozy cafe in North Park. Her palms were damp. Her notes were neat, but trembling slightly in her hands. Across the table sat a middle-aged woman named Sophia Green, planning a 25th wedding anniversary celebration for her parents. "I've heard lovely things about you," Sophia said with a smile. "And your father?" "Jill says he carved a ring box that made half the guests cry." Emily chuckled. "He has that effect." Without saying a word, they spent the next hour going over ideas, soft jazz, hanging lights, a cake with their original wedding photo recreated in icing. Sophia liked that Emily took her time listening, didn't rush with pre-made templates, and even sketched centerpiece ideas on a napkin. "You've got something special," Sophia said as they shook hands. "You really make people feel seen." Emily smiled, deeply. "Thank you. That means a lot." As she walked back to her car, she noticed her reflection in a storefront window. Something had changed. She looked steadier, firmer in her steps. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like a girl trying to outrun her mistakes. She felt like a woman building something from them. Back home, Richard was in the backyard sanding a new piece of cedar. Emily approached and set a bakery box on the bench beside him. "What's that?" he asked without looking up. "Thank you pastries from today's client." He raised an eyebrow. "You're charging enough, right?" She laughed. "Barely. But this one felt special." He finally looked at her. "So do you." Emily sat beside him, brushing away curls of sawdust. Dad, have I ever told you how much I admire what you do? This workshop. The way you shape things with your hands. Richard shrugged. It's just wood. It's not. You make something from nothing. You make things last. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I used to think I failed you. When you left. I thought maybe I didn't teach you how to tell the difference between love and the idea of love. Emily reached over and placed her hand on his. You didn't fail me. I just had to fall on my own. He nodded, slow and solemn. That's the hardest part of being a parent. That evening, Emily stayed up late at her desk, surrounded by color swatches and sample menus. The house was quiet, save for the crickets outside and the occasional creak of wood settling. Her old calendar planner was now full again, not with a fantasy life, but real, concrete steps. Bookings, ideas, places she'd been and places she was headed. She flipped to a blank page and wrote across the top. Goals for Carter Moments, Year 1. Launch official website. Work with at least 10 couples/families. Pay Dad back for the new shelves. He won't let me, but I'll sneak it. Speak at one local wedding fair. Learn to carve at least one thing from wood. She stared at the last line, then smiled to herself. A piece of her father had made it into her dream, just like he had made room for her, even when she didn't deserve it. The next day, she found Richard in the garage, fiddling with an old block of cherry wood. What's this one for? She asked. Practice piece, he replied. You want to learn to carve, right? Emily blinked. Wait, you're serious? He handed her a smaller carving knife, already sharpened. I don't talk much, he said, but I can teach with my hands. She took the knife, her fingers uncertain. I might ruin it. You will, he said. At first. But that's how you learn. She met his eyes. And for the first time since she was a child, Emily felt the bond between them not as something fragile or broken, but strong, crafted, and real. Just like the wood in her hands. Chapter 10. Full circle. It was a Sunday afternoon when Emily found herself standing alone at the edge of the garden, watching a couple hold hands under the arch her father had built. It wasn't an official event, just a small vow renewal for two old high school sweethearts who had reconnected after 30 years. They hadn't wanted a planner. They just wanted someone who understood how to make something meaningful. So they asked Emily. And of course, she said yes. She had arranged the chairs in a semicircle beneath the apricot tree, strung tiny lights along the edge of the fence, and added wildflowers from the farmer's market to the mason jars. Her father had carved a wooden heart with their initials in the center and placed it discreetly on the table beside the cake. The guests were few, no more than 10, but the moment was quiet, sincere. Beautiful. Emily stood back, unnoticed, and let the ceremony unfold. She didn't need to be seen. She just needed to know she was helping create something lasting. Later that evening, as she and Richard packed away the folding chairs, he handed her a small, cloth-wrapped item. What's this? She asked, brushing wood dust from her sleeve. Open it, he said simply. Inside was a small wooden plaque, carefully carved with smooth, rounded edges and her name at the center. Emily Carter, Carter Moments, built with hands, grown with heart. She stared at it. Breath caught. You made this. He nodded. Figured your business needed a proper sign. Her voice cracked. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time, he hugged her back, not the careful, brief way he used to, but firm, real. Like a father holding the world in his arms. I thought I lost you. She whispered. You never did, he said. I was just waiting for you to find your way back. That night, Emily hung the sign by the window of the garage, now fully her studio. As she stood beneath it, a breeze rustled the trees. The house behind her glowed with warm yellow light. And somewhere in the quiet, she could feel her mother smiling too. It wasn't the life she had imagined. It was better. Because it was hers. Because she had made it. And because someone had believed in her when she forgot how to believe in herself. Chapter 11. The Woman in the Blue Dress. 2 months had passed since Emily hung the Carter Moments sign by her studio window. Business was steady. Not booming, but steady. Weddings, anniversaries, intimate birthday parties. The kind of events that didn't make headlines, but stayed in hearts. One Monday morning, Emily sat at her desk flipping through color swatches when the studio doorbell chimed. She stood and opened it to find a woman standing hesitantly in the frame, mid-30s, wearing a pale blue dress and clutching her purse like a shield. "Hi," the woman said. "Are you Emily Carter?" "I am," Emily said with a warm smile. "Come in." The woman stepped inside, looking around at the handcrafted signs, candle samples, and shelves of ribbon and dried flowers. Her eyes lingered on the wooden plaque with Emily's name. "I heard about you through Sophia Green," the woman said. "She said you're not just a planner, that you listen." Emily tilted her head slightly, inviting openness. "I try." The woman offered a fragile smile. "My name's Allison." Emily gestured to the small table in the corner, beside a jar of chamomile tea and an arrangement of daisies. "Have a seat, Allison. Would you like some tea?" "Yes, please." Over steaming cups. Allison slowly unraveled her story. A few months ago, she'd filed for divorce after 5 years of emotional isolation. Her husband had never raised a hand to her, but his silence, his cold glances, the way he made her question her worth, had chipped her away piece by piece. And now, she was trying to plan her daughter's 10th birthday party. "I know it sounds small," Allison said, brushing away a tear. "But I want her to have a day that tells her, we're okay now." Emily's heart tightened, because she saw herself. The woman in front of her was walking the same dark hallway she had once walked, searching for the light at the other end. "I don't think that sounds small at all," Emily said softly. "I think that sounds like a beginning." They planned for hours. Pink and gold balloons, an ice cream bar, soft music, a handmade photo booth. Allison's eyes lit up as Emily sketched out ideas and listed vendors she trusted. Richard even peeked in with a tray of tea refills, silent as always, but nodded respectfully at Allison, who gave him a surprised smile. "He's your dad." Emily nodded. "Silent partner in more ways than one." "He has kind eyes," Allison said. Emily smiled. "That's how he loves." With his hands. And his eyes. When Allison left that afternoon, she held the planning folder close to her chest. "Thank you," she said. "You have no idea how much this means." "I think I do," Emily replied. That evening, Emily sat at the dinner table with her father, spooning roasted vegetables onto their plates. "She reminded me of me," Emily said suddenly. The way she sat. Like she didn't know if she was allowed to take up space. Richard took a bite of carrot, chewing thoughtfully. "You helped her," he said. "I think I helped myself too." He looked at her. "That's the thing about healing. Sometimes, when you offer it to others, you find more of it in yourself." Emily paused. "When Mom died, did you feel like that?" He set his fork down, eyes clouded with memory. "Yes. Every time I fixed a chair or sanded a frame, it helped me keep her close. And helped me give something to you, even when I didn't know how to say anything." Emily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I hear you now, Dad." And he nodded. That was enough. Chapter 12. A place for starting over. The morning of the party arrived with clear skies and the kind of golden California light that made everything look like it had been touched by hope. Emily arrived early at the small community garden Allison had reserved. It was tucked between rows of townhouses, a secret oasis of climbing roses, twinkling fairy lights strung between trees, and picnic benches covered with soft, cotton linens. Richard was already there, hammering the final nails into a wooden "Happy Birthday, Lila" sign. He stepped back to inspect it, simple, sturdy. Beautiful. just like everything he made. Emily unboxed the pastel balloons, floral centerpieces, and custom name tags for each child. She moved with fluid grace now, no longer second-guessing herself, no longer asking permission from anyone but her own instinct. When Allison arrived with Lila, the little girl gasped and stopped in her tracks. "Mom," she whispered, eyes wide. "This is for me?" Allison knelt beside her and nodded, voice trembling. "Yes, sweetheart. All of this." Lila looked around, then darted toward the cupcake table with glee. Allison turned to Emily, her eyes already brimming. "She hasn't smiled like that in months," she said. "Not since the night I packed our things and left." Emily reached out and gently touched her shoulder. "She's smiling because she sees you standing on your own." The party went perfectly. Children painted tiny wooden boxes that Richard had carved the week before, each one with a child's initials etched on top. They played ring toss and laughed over silly charades. Lila's eyes sparkled as she blew out her 10 candles, and she hugged her mother so tightly afterward that the entire garden went silent in reverence for that single, sacred moment. Emily stood at a distance, arms crossed over her chest, watching it all unfold. Then someone stepped beside her, Allison. "You know," Allison said softly, "I thought I was just hiring an event planner. But you gave me something more." Emily smiled. "Heart full. You gave it to yourself. I just helped hold the space." Allison glanced at the children laughing, the guests clapping, her daughter glowing in the middle of it all. "I didn't think I had the strength." Emily looked at her gently. "You didn't need to have it all at once. You just needed to take one step." That evening, after the last of the decorations were packed and the garden returned to stillness, Emily and her father drove home in comfortable silence. Back at the house, Emily sat in the garage-turned studio, scribbling down reflections in her planner. She wrote, "It's not about flowers or chairs or tables. It's about making space for joy when the heart thinks it doesn't deserve it." She looked over at Richard, who was sitting nearby polishing another sign. "I think I want to do more events like that," she said aloud. He looked up. "Birthday parties?" he asked. She shook her head. "Healing events. For women who are starting over. Who need a beginning." He paused, then nodded once. "Good idea." Emily smiled. "I could start a side project. Call it Fresh Start Series or something." "Call it whatever you want," he said. "Just make it real." That night, Emily stared up at the ceiling of her old room. She thought about all the times she had tried to be perfect for her husband, for society, even for herself. But real strength, she now knew, wasn't about having it all together. It was about being able to fall apart and still get back up with kindness. And maybe, just maybe, help others do the same. Chapter 13. Fresh Starts and Open Doors. By the end of the week, the idea had grown roots in Emily's heart. She sat at her desk with a blank notepad in front of her, tapping a pencil against her lip. The garage door was half open, letting in warm afternoon light and the faint scent of sawdust from her father's side of the space. At the top of the page, she wrote in capital letters, "Fresh Start Series." Underneath, she began a list. For women rebuilding after divorce or loss. Safe, gentle, personal celebrations. Birthdays, new jobs, even just I made it days. Custom wooden keepsakes from Dad. Soft lighting. Handmade touches. A space for joy. No permission needed. Emily wasn't sure how she'd find clients. This wasn't something people searched for on Google. It was something people felt they needed, but might be too afraid to ask for. So she posted a simple message on her business page. Not all events have to be big. Some of them just have to be honest. Fresh Start Series. For women beginning again. Whatever that means for you. We plan more than parties. We hold space for healing. Emily Carter, founder of Carter Moments. Then she closed her laptop and went for a walk. The response surprised her. Dozens of messages poured in over the next 2 days. Some short. I think I need this. Can we talk? Some long, like journal entries. I left an abusive marriage 3 weeks ago. My friends want to celebrate, but I just want something quiet and meaningful. I'm turning 40 next month. I never thought I'd be alone. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Emily responded to each one with care, never rushing, never copying and pasting. She didn't just want clients. She wanted connection. One afternoon, Richard knocked on the door of the studio, holding a small crate of hand-carved keepsake boxes. These okay? He asked, setting them down. Emily picked one up. It was simple, no paint, no frills, but inlaid with the word begin in gentle script. They're perfect, she said, voice catching. He watched her for a moment, then said, you're doing something good here. She looked up at him. So are you. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. You know, your mom used to say the most powerful thing you could give someone was permission to start over. Emily blinked. She said that. Not in those exact words, he said. But she lived it. The first Fresh Start event was a tea party for a woman named Melissa, celebrating 1 year since she moved out of a toxic home. The next was a solo cake and champagne celebration for a woman who had survived breast cancer. The third was for a woman who had been ghosted by her fiancé 2 weeks before their wedding. Each time, Emily created something soft, beautiful, and private. No speeches. No explanations. Just a space to say, you are allowed to begin again. Late one evening, after the third event, Emily and Richard sat side by side in the workshop. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, Richard asked, do you feel tired? Emily thought for a moment. Yes, but the good kind. He nodded. Then you're doing it right. She looked at him, the man who had once been a wall in her life, who now stood like a lighthouse. You always knew I'd come back, didn't you? He didn't smile, but his eyes softened in the quiet way they always did. I never stopped leaving the light on. Chapter 14. The Story She Never Told. Emily stood in front of the mirror in her childhood bedroom, holding a pair of pearl earrings in her hand. They had belonged to her mother, worn only on rare occasions, always with that quiet grace that made people stop and look twice. Tonight, Emily was going to wear them, because tonight she was going to tell her story. It had started with a simple invitation sent via email from the director of a local women's group. Dear Emily, we've heard about your Fresh Start series and the healing spaces you've created. Would you be willing to speak at our next gathering? Just a short reflection? Our theme this month is Reclaiming Joy. Emily had stared at the screen for a long time. Not because she didn't want to, but because for the first time, she would have to speak out loud the story she had only whispered through gestures, choices, and silence. Now, standing in front of the mirror, she fastened the earrings and took a breath. Downstairs, Richard waited by the truck. You ready? He asked when she appeared. She nodded. Not really. He handed her a folded piece of paper. What's this? I jotted something down, he said. Just in case you freeze up. She opened it. It said, in blocky, careful handwriting, just say the truth. The rest will follow. Emily laughed through a nervous breath. Thanks, Dad. He opened the passenger door. I'll wait outside the hall. She looked at him. You could come in, you know. He shook his head. This is your light. I'll just hold the door. The community center was small, but the room was full. Women of all ages sat in folding chairs, sipping tea, notebooks on their laps. There was a kindness in the air. No judgment. Just space. When Emily's name was called, she walked up slowly. Her hands weren't shaking, but her voice felt fragile in her throat. She glanced down at the cue card she'd written the night before, but then thought of the note in her pocket. Her father's words. She didn't use the card. Instead, she looked up at the room, took a breath, and said, I used to believe starting over meant admitting failure. that it meant you did something wrong. Or worse, that you were wrong. She paused. The room was silent, listening. But I've learned that starting over is not weakness. It's courage. It's standing in front of a broken life and saying, I'm still here. And I still matter. A few women nodded. She continued. I left a marriage that nearly erased me. I lost myself, my confidence, my voice. But I found it again in quiet mornings in a wooden sign carved by my father's hands. In the first smile of a woman celebrating her own survival. She smiled then. A full, radiant smile. My business is called Carter Moments. But the truth is, I didn't build it alone. My father, who never said much, stood behind me when I was too scared to stand on my own. She looked toward the door, even though she couldn't see him from where she stood. And now, I help other women start over. Not because I have all the answers, but because I remember what it felt like to forget I was allowed to begin again. The room exhaled. Applause followed, not loud, not dramatic, but warm and deeply real. After the talk, women approached her with hugs, with stories of their own, with tears they didn't apologize for. And when she finally walked outside, Richard was still there, leaning against the truck beneath the soft glow of the parking lot lights. Well, he asked. She climbed into the passenger seat and exhaled. I said the truth. He handed her a thermos. Then you did good. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. But it wasn't anxiety. It was peace. She sat by the window, looking out into the darkness, her mother's earrings still on, and whispered, Thank you for the silence that held me and for the voice I found inside it. And then she wrote 3 words at the bottom of her journal page. I am home. Chapter 15. Letters from the Past. The morning sun filtered softly through the blinds, casting warm stripes across the wooden floor. Emily was sipping her coffee in the kitchen when the mail arrived. A small stack of envelopes, the usual bills, a flyer from a local florist, and one pale blue envelope that made her pause. Her name was written in familiar handwriting, elegant but slightly shaky. With a cautious breath, she slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Dear Emily, I hope this letter finds you well. I've thought of you often, wondering how you are, what life has brought your way since we last spoke. I know I hurt you deeply, and for that, I am truly sorry. It was never my intention to cause you pain, though I know that is no excuse for my actions. If you are willing, I would like to meet and talk, not to reopen old wounds, but to find some peace between us. Yours sincerely, Daniel. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter back. Memories rushed in, some sharp and bitter, others strangely muted. She looked toward the window where the garden bloomed in full sunlight. Somewhere beyond the rose bushes, her father was working in the woodshop, hammering and sanding with the quiet determination she had come to love. Could she find peace in this letter? Could she even consider a meeting? Her phone buzzed, pulling her back to the present. It was a message from Allison, her fresh start client, asking if she could stop by later to discuss another event. Emily smiled, the weight in her chest lifting just a bit. Some doors close to others, but not all at once. That evening, after Allison left, Emily sat with her father in the workshop. She showed him the letter. He read it slowly, then looked up. This is your choice, he said gently. Only you can decide what peace means for you. Emily nodded. It's okay to be cautious, he continued. But remember, forgiveness is for the person who's been hurt, not the one who caused it. She swallowed hard. I need time. He reached over, placing his calloused hand over hers. We'll take all the time you need. Later that night, Emily wrote in her journal, I am learning that healing is not a straight line. It twists and turns, opens and closes. But every step forward is mine to take. She looked at the letter once more before placing it carefully in a drawer. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 16. Facing Shadows. The days that followed the letter's arrival were restless. Emily found herself waking in the quiet hours of the morning, the pale blue envelope haunting her thoughts like a ghost she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She walked through her routine with an absent gaze, her hands busy but her mind tangled in memories she thought she had carefully boxed away. One afternoon, as she helped her father sand a piece of cherrywood at the workbench, her voice finally broke the silence. "Dad, how did you face losing Mom?" Richard paused, setting down the sandpaper. His eyes, usually so steady, clouded for a moment. "It didn't happen all at once," he said slowly. "Some days, I felt like I was drowning. Others, like I was holding onto a thread." Emily watched him carefully. "But I kept working," he continued, "making something with my hands, even when it felt pointless. It was how I stayed connected, to her, to you, to hope." She nodded, taking the words deep into her heart. That evening, Emily sat at her desk, the letter unopened beside her laptop. She stared at the blank screen, fingers trembling over the keyboard as she tried to write a reply. What words could she say that wouldn't reopen wounds or sound like weakness? Finally, she closed the laptop and grabbed the letter. Taking a deep breath, she began. "Daniel, thank you for your letter. I am still healing and I need more time before we can talk. I hope you understand." She folded the paper carefully, placed it in an envelope, and set it on the kitchen counter. A few days later, her phone buzzed with a message she wasn't expecting. It was from Daniel. "Thank you for your honesty, Emily. I respect your space and hope to build peace, one step at a time." Emily felt a small flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, hope. At the workshop that evening, Richard looked up from a half-carved wooden heart. "Sometimes the hardest part," he said, "is just deciding to look at the shadows. But it's the only way to find the light." Emily smiled faintly. "Thanks, Dad." He nodded, as if to say, anytime. Chapter 17. Unexpected Bridges. The next morning, Emily's phone chimed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated but answered. "Emily? This is Claire, Daniel's sister." Emily blinked, surprised. "Hello. I know this is sudden," Claire said softly, "but Daniel asked me to reach out. He wants to support you in any way you feel comfortable. He's been through his own journey and wants to make amends." Emily considered this. "Thank you, Claire. That means a lot." Over the next few weeks, Claire became a quiet presence in Emily's life, checking in with gentle messages, offering help with errands, and occasionally sharing stories about their childhood. One afternoon, Claire brought over a box filled with old family photos and letters from their mother, hoping it might help Emily understand parts of Daniel she hadn't seen. As Emily sifted through the memories, she found herself seeing Daniel in a new light, flawed, but human. Meanwhile, Richard watched the changes in his daughter with quiet pride. "She's opening doors I never thought she would," he said to a neighbor one afternoon. Emily was learning that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant building new bridges even with shadows from the past. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Emily sat beside her father on the porch. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of forgiving. Of trusting again. Of opening my heart to someone who hurt me." Richard placed his hand on hers. "Fear is a visitor. You don't have to invite it to stay." She smiled softly. "With you here, I think I can face it." Chapter 18. The Courage to Reconcile. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Emily finally agreed to meet Daniel. They chose a quiet cafe nestled in a tree-lined street of San Diego, far enough from the neighborhoods they both knew well. As she approached the table, her heart hammered with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. Daniel stood to greet her, eyes earnest, but cautious. "Thank you for coming," he said softly. Emily nodded, settling into the seat across from him. They talked, slowly at first, about the past, the pain, the mistakes. Daniel listened without defense, offering no excuses but sincere apologies. Emily spoke honestly about the nights she felt lost and the struggle to find herself again. It wasn't easy. It wasn't neat. But in the rawness of their conversation, a fragile bridge began to form. After the meeting, Emily walked through the park nearby, the sun dipping low and casting long shadows. She thought about the journey she had taken, the heartbreak, the healing. The steady presence of her father who had never stopped believing in her. She pulled out her phone and sent a message to Richard. "I met with Daniel. It was hard, but I'm glad I did." His reply came almost instantly. "I'm proud of you. Remember, strength isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it." Emily smiled, folding her phone away. For the first time in years, she felt a weight lift, not because the past was erased, but because she had faced it head-on. And with every step, she was reclaiming her story. Chapter 19. Inspiring New Beginnings. Word about Emily's Fresh Start series had begun to spread beyond her local community. Invitations came in from women's groups, local radio shows, even a small podcast dedicated to stories of resilience. Each opportunity was a chance to share not just her business, but her journey of healing and hope. One Saturday morning, Emily stood before a crowd of women at a community center, her voice steady but warm. "I started this because I wanted to create spaces where healing could happen, not just through flowers and decorations, but through the simple act of being seen and heard," she said. The room filled with nods, quiet tears, and applause. After the talk, several women approached her, sharing their own stories of pain and renewal. Emily listened carefully, offering words of encouragement, reminding them, as she reminded herself, that the path to healing was not linear, but always possible. At home, her relationship with Richard deepened. The silence between them was no longer heavy but comfortable. They worked side by side in the workshop, shared meals, and sometimes simply sat together, words unnecessary. One evening, as they carved a small wooden plaque with the words "Strength and Grace," Emily looked at her father and said, "Thank you for never giving up on me." He smiled, a rare softness in his eyes. "You never stopped being my daughter. That was never in question." As the sun set on another day, Emily stood at the window of her studio, looking out at the neighborhood bathed in golden light. Her life was far from perfect, but it was real, it was hers, and it was filled with possibility. She whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." Chapter 20. Full Hearts. Open Doors. The morning sun poured through the windows of the Carter home, casting warm light over the wooden floors and the familiar scent of fresh pine from the workshop. The house was alive with quiet energy, the kind that comes from healing, hope, and new beginnings. Emily stood beside her father in the backyard, where a celebration was unfolding. Friends, family, and clients gathered to honor the launch of her first full year in business and the journey they had traveled together. Richard watched as Emily laughed, the kind of laugh that came from deep within, unguarded and free. He stepped closer, folding his arms with a soft smile. "Look at you." Emily met his gaze, tears sparkling in her eyes. "I wouldn't be here without you." They shared a moment of silence, a language older than words. Later, as the sun began to set, Emily and Richard stood side by side beneath the wooden arch he had crafted years ago, now adorned with fresh flowers and twinkling lights. "I never knew how to show you love before," Richard said quietly. Emily squeezed his hand. "You showed me every day." She looked out at the gathering, the faces of women who had found strength, hope, and community through her Fresh Start series. Women who had come from places broken and afraid, now standing tall, ready to begin again. "This is more than a business," Emily whispered. "It's a family, a lifeline." Richard nodded. "And it's only just begun." As twilight deepened, Emily took a deep breath and spoke to the crowd. "Thank you all for believing in new beginnings, for believing in yourselves. No matter where you've come from or what you've been through, you are worthy of joy, love, and peace. The applause rose like a wave, filling the night with warmth. Emily glanced at her father, her silent hero, her steady anchor. Together, they had woven a story of pain transformed into hope, of wounds healed by quiet hands, of love, steady, silent, unbreakable. And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Emily knew, with every fiber of her being, that this was home.